You've watched everyone else move forward while you felt stuck in a waiting room. You asked God why your promises were delayed. But let me tell you the truth. It wasn't a punishment. The universe paused your timeline because what's coming requires a version of you that only the wilderness could build. And if you're being honest, this season has been exhausting. You watched people pass you by. You watched opportunities appear for others while your own doors remained closed. You prayed. You waited. You believed. And sometimes, despite your faith, you wondered if you had somehow been forgotten. Because from where you were standing, it looked like nothing was moving. The same routine, the same waiting, the same unanswered questions. Meanwhile, everyone else seemed to be advancing while you remained stuck in place. But what if you misunderstood the purpose of the pause? What if the delay was never punishment? What if the silence was never abandonment? What if this entire season was actually an incubation period? Because that is often how divine preparation works. Growth that will eventually become visible usually begins in places nobody can see. Long before a building rises above the ground, its foundation is being reinforced beneath the surface. Long before a tree produces fruit, its roots are expanding where no one is paying attention. And long before a chosen one enters their next season, heaven begins preparing them for the weight of what is coming. That preparation rarely feels exciting. It feels slow. It feels lonely. It feels confusing. But that does not make it meaningless. In fact, some of the most important work of your life may have happened during the seasons that looked the least productive from the outside. Because while you were measuring progress through visible results, heaven was measuring preparation. While you were asking why nothing was changing, something deeper was being built. And before the blessing could arrive, the person receiving it had to be transformed first. That is why this waiting season happened. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. One of the hardest truths about divine preparation is that heaven cannot build something extraordinary on top of a foundation that is already compromised. That is why the waiting season often begins with loss. Not because you are being punished, not because you failed, but because certain things cannot travel with you into the next chapter. At first, this process feels unfair. Relationships start changing. Friendships that once felt permanent begin fading away. Old habits lose their appeal. Certain environments become uncomfortable. Opportunities you desperately wanted suddenly disappear. And because you cannot yet see what is coming, all you notice is what is leaving. That is where many chosen ones become discouraged. They focus on the subtraction while heaven is focused on the reconstruction. Because before the blessing could arrive, the old foundation had to be examined. The mindsets built around fear. The habits built around survival. The relationships built around convenience instead of alignment. The patterns that once felt normal but would eventually become limitations. Those things had to go. And often, they did not leave quietly. Some friendships ended with confusion. Some relationships ended with heartbreak. Some dreams collapsed completely. Some plans that looked perfect on paper suddenly stopped working. You prayed for movement and instead experienced removal. That removal was painful, but it was necessary. Because what is coming requires stability. It requires clarity. It requires a stronger internal structure than the one you previously had. And heaven understood something you could not yet see. If the blessing arrived too soon, it would have been built on unstable ground. Think about how much has changed inside you during this season. The things that used to trigger you no longer have the same power. The people whose approval once controlled your decisions no longer influence you the same way. The habits that once felt impossible to break are losing their grip. The version of you that entered this waiting season is not the same version sitting here today. That transformation did not happen accidentally. It happened because the old foundation was being stripped away. Read that again. The old foundation was being stripped away. And stripping is never comfortable. No one enjoys watching familiar things disappear. No one enjoys outgrowing environments they once called home. No one enjoys realizing that certain people were only assigned to a temporary chapter of their story. But growth often requires separation. Because not everything that was good for one season is meant for the next. That is what the waiting room was accomplishing behind the scenes. It was clearing space, removing distractions, exposing weaknesses, revealing attachments, breaking dependencies, and strengthening areas of your character that would eventually support the weight of your future. From the outside, it looked like nothing was happening. In reality, everything was happening. The foundation was being rebuilt. And without that process, the next level of your life would never have been able to sustain itself. That is why the delay was necessary. The blessing was not being withheld. The foundation was being upgraded. One of the questions many chosen ones ask during a waiting season is simple. If this blessing was meant for me, why didn't it happen sooner? It seems like a reasonable question. After all, you were praying for it, working for it, believing for it. From your perspective, receiving it earlier would have solved so many problems. It would have removed uncertainty. It would have eased frustration. It would have saved you from years of waiting. But heaven often sees dangers that you cannot yet recognize. Because not every delay is denial. Sometimes a delay is protection. Think about who you were a few years ago. Think about your mindset, your boundaries, your emotional maturity, your ability to handle pressure, your ability to recognize manipulation, your ability to protect what matters without seeking validation from everyone around you. Would that version of you have been fully prepared for what is coming now? For many chosen ones, the honest answer is no. Because elevation magnifies everything. Success magnifies weaknesses. Influence magnifies insecurities. Opportunities magnify character flaws. And blessings placed in unprepared hands often become burdens instead of gifts. That is why premature elevation can be dangerous. A person can receive the right opportunity at the wrong time and still lose it. A person can enter a powerful season before developing discernment and end up surrounded by people who only want access to the benefits. A person can achieve the goal they prayed for and discover they lack the internal stability necessary to sustain it. Heaven understood that, long before you did. That is why some doors remained closed. That is why some opportunities were delayed. That is why certain timelines refused to move according to your schedule. Because what looked like waiting was often protection from premature exposure. Read that again. Protection from premature exposure. If some of your biggest opportunities had arrived before your discernment matured, the wrong people would have gained access to them. If certain doors had opened before your boundaries strengthened, you might have allowed others to drain what was meant to grow. If success had appeared before your identity became secure, you might have spent years trying to maintain something you were not emotionally prepared to carry. The delay prevented that. It gave you time to develop wisdom, time to recognize unhealthy patterns, time to learn who deserves access and who does not, time to strengthen the parts of yourself that success alone could never build. And while you were frustrated by the waiting, heaven was protecting the blessing. That is an important distinction. The blessing was never in danger of missing you. The danger was that it might reach you before you were fully prepared to protect it. Now look at how differently you think. Look at how differently you handle people. Look at how differently you respond to pressure. The person who once begged for immediate elevation now understands the value of preparation. Because today you can see something your younger self could not. Getting what you wanted too early might have cost you everything. The delay was not punishment. It was preservation. And one day, when you fully step into what has been prepared for you, you will realize that the timing was never working against you. It was working for you all along. The most important things built during your waiting season were not visible. That is why so many people misunderstood what was happening in your life. They looked at your circumstances and assumed nothing was changing. They saw the delays, the closed doors, the quiet seasons, the lack of obvious progress. And because they were measuring growth through visible results, they completely missed the deeper transformation taking place beneath the surface. But heaven was never focused only on your external success. It was focused on your internal infrastructure. Because blessings can open doors, but character determines what happens after you walk through them. That is what the silent days were building. Every disappointment taught you emotional regulation. Every delay taught you patience. Every season of uncertainty taught you how to trust even when the evidence was incomplete. Every setback forced you to develop resilience. Every lonely chapter strengthened your relationship with your purpose. At the time, those lessons felt painful. Sometimes they felt unnecessary. Sometimes they felt unfair. But now you can see that each challenge was reinforcing something essential inside you. You were learning how to remain steady when circumstances became unstable. You were learning how to protect your peace without needing constant reassurance. You were learning how to stay grounded when life refused to move according to your timeline. That is infrastructure. And unlike temporary success, infrastructure lasts. Think about how differently you handle pressure today compared to a few years ago. Situations that once would have shattered your confidence now become opportunities for growth. People who once could have manipulated your emotions no longer have the same access. Delays that once would have filled you with panic now create reflection instead of fear. That growth is not accidental. It was built, one difficult day at a time, one lesson at a time, one challenge at a time. And perhaps the most important thing developed during this season was faith. Not shallow faith based on immediate results. Deep faith. The kind that survives unanswered questions. The kind that survives uncertainty. The kind that remains standing even when visible evidence disappears. Because anyone can trust when everything is working. But chosen ones learn how to trust while everything appears still. That ability becomes priceless later. Why? Because the next level of your life will require more than talent, more than opportunity, more than favorable circumstances. It will require stability. It will require emotional discipline. It will require a character strong enough to carry responsibility without collapsing under pressure. And that is exactly what the waiting season was creating. Read that again. The waiting season was creating the person capable of sustaining the blessing, not just receiving it. Sustaining it. That is why these quiet years mattered so much. They were not empty years. They were construction years. The walls were being reinforced. The foundation was being strengthened. The armor was being upgraded. And although nobody could see it happening from the outside, your inner world was becoming powerful enough to support a future far greater than anything you could have handled when the journey first began. This is the part most people never see coming. After years of slow progress, hidden growth, and frustrating delays, everything suddenly starts moving at once. And to outsiders, it looks like it happened overnight. They see the opportunity, the breakthrough, the recognition, the open doors, the momentum, and because they were not present during the preparation season, they assume your success appeared instantly. But they are only seeing the harvest. They never saw the roots. This is what many people call the bamboo effect. For years, bamboo appears to do almost nothing above the surface. People look at the ground and assume growth is not happening. They assume the seed failed. They assume the process is broken. What they cannot see is the massive root system developing underneath. And once that foundation is complete, the visible growth happens with astonishing speed. That is exactly how many chosen ones experience their breakthrough. The waiting season feels endless. Progress seems invisible. The results appear small. But beneath the surface, preparation is happening at a level nobody can fully appreciate. Then suddenly, everything changes. The opportunities begin arriving. The connections begin forming. The doors begin opening. The resources begin appearing. And the same people who once questioned your journey start calling you lucky. Lucky. As if luck spent years teaching you resilience. As if luck stripped away toxic attachments. As if luck developed your faith during seasons when nothing made sense. As if luck built the emotional strength required to handle what is arriving now. No, this is not luck. This is the visible result of invisible preparation. That is why acceleration often feels shocking even to the chosen one experiencing it. You become so accustomed to waiting that movement almost feels unfamiliar at first. After years of slow growth, the pace changes dramatically. Situations that once took months begin shifting in days. Doors that remained closed for years suddenly open. Opportunities that seemed impossible begin appearing from unexpected directions. And people wonder what happened. The answer is simple. The roots finished growing. Read that again. The roots finished growing. The foundation became strong enough. The infrastructure became stable enough. The armor became durable enough. The preparation reached completion. And once heaven determines that the internal work is sufficient, the external results can begin accelerating rapidly. That is why you must never judge your future based on the speed of your current season. Some seasons are designed for planting. Some are designed for strengthening. Some are designed for preparation. And then there are seasons designed for acceleration. You are closer to that season than you realize. The years that felt wasted were not wasted. The delays that felt unfair were not unfair. The silence that felt confusing was not meaningless. Everything was contributing to the root system beneath the surface. Every lonely night, every closed door, every unanswered question, every lesson learned in private was adding strength to a foundation that nobody else could see. And now, because the roots are strong, the growth that follows will be able to withstand the weight of what is coming. That is the beauty of divine timing. When it finally moves, it often moves faster than anyone expected. And when your acceleration begins, people will focus on the speed of your rise while completely overlooking the years of invisible preparation that made it possible. Here is the truth your waiting season has been preparing you to understand. You are not the same person who entered this wilderness. The delays changed you. The silence changed you. The setbacks changed you. And that change was the entire point. Because the blessing that is approaching requires more than desire. It requires capacity. It requires stability. It requires someone strong enough to carry success without losing themselves, influence without becoming distracted, and opportunity without becoming overwhelmed. That person is who you have been becoming all along. For so long, you focused on what had not arrived yet. You looked at the closed doors, the postponed timelines, the promises that seemed to move further away every time you got close. But now, if you look honestly at your journey, you will see something remarkable. You survived seasons that would have broken an earlier version of yourself. You developed discernment that did not exist before. You learned patience that could not have been taught any other way. You gained emotional strength through challenges that once felt unbearable. You built faith capable of surviving uncertainty. That is armor. Not the kind people can see. The kind that matters. The kind that protects your peace when pressure increases. The kind that helps you remain grounded when opportunities multiply. The kind that allows you to carry greater responsibility without collapsing under its weight. Read that again. The waiting season was not just delaying your blessing. It was upgrading your capacity to carry it. And now, something feels different. You may not have every answer yet. You may not see the entire path ahead. But deep inside, there is a growing sense that the season is changing. The same spirit that sustained you through the wilderness is now preparing to lead you into something new. Because heaven never wastes preparation. The lessons were real. The growth was real. The strengthening was real. And if heaven spent this much time building you, it is because what is coming requires every piece of armor you now possess. You are ready for the wait. That is why the door is beginning to unlock. So if you are listening to this in the middle of a waiting season, hear this message clearly. Do not quit now. Do not let temporary delays convince you that your story has stalled. Do not let silence make you believe you have been forgotten. And do not compare your timeline to people whose assignment was completely different from yours. Your season had a purpose. Every lesson, every setback, every closed door, every lonely moment, every difficult day, none of it was wasted. You were being prepared. You were being strengthened. You were being equipped. And now, whether you fully realize it or not, you are standing closer to breakthrough than you have ever been before. The foundation is stronger. The roots are deeper. The armor is heavier. And the person you have become is finally capable of carrying what once would have overwhelmed you. So hold on a little longer. Trust the process a little longer. Believe a little longer. Because sometimes the greatest blessings arrive right after the season that made you question everything. If this message spoke directly to your spirit today, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who is currently in a waiting season. And in the comments, type, "My waiting season prepared me." Let that declaration remind you that the pause was never punishment. It was preparation.